They say there's a silence right before life returns, a thin blade of quiet that could cut a room in half. I heard it tonight, hovering over the operating table like frost. The monitor held a flat line, and my breath fogged against the inside of my shield. Somewhere outside the glass, midnight rain stitched the city together with silver thread. "Clamp," I said. My hands were steady. They always were. I guided the last suture, checked the anastomosis, and nodded. We'd brought a stranger's heart across cold miles and colder paperwork. We'd whispered 1,000 sterile prayers. Now there was only the switch to throw, the shock to deliver, the question that has never learned to be patient. "Ready?" the anesthesiologist murmured. For a half second, the world stopped. Then the heart kicked. The monitor stuttered, caught itself, and began to dance. A slow, authoritative looped-up rolled through the chest cavity and bloomed against my gloves like heat. The rhythm rose, found itself, settled. And something inside that rhythm, a hesitation before each second beat, a soft syncopation at the end of the fourth, pulled at a string buried deep under my ribs. No. It's his heartbeat," I whispered, before I could stop myself. The scrub nurse looked up. "Doctor," "Nothing," I managed. "Artifact." But the word felt like a lie left in the open air, fogging the face shield again and again. We closed and practiced silence. When we wheeled the recipient to ICU, the rain had gentled to a hush. The city's red lights pulsed on wet asphalt like faraway beacons. I peeled off my gloves and tried to leave the sound behind in operating room 3. It followed me anyway, sticking to the inside of my skull like a forgotten song. It had been a year since Pei Xingchuan died. A year since I'd pressed the heel of my hand against another chest, counting in a voice that wouldn't stop shaking. A year since the universe told me that skill and love aren't currency it accepts. His heart had been cremated with the rest of him. That was what I'd been told, what I'd signed, what the hospital records promised me with stamped certainty. But this rhythm, this particular, infuriatingly intimate rhythm, belonged to him. I knew because I had fallen asleep on it, cheek to his sternum, back when time had not yet learned to run away from us. In the residence lounge, I pulled my hair down and pressed both palms against my ears until I saw stars. When I opened them, the room was the same, vending machine hum, the tired cough of the air conditioning, the smell of coffee that has always been yesterday. On my phone, the transplant record had already populated. Donor, anonymous. Time of arrival, 2217. Cross-match compatible. The tag that mattered most was new. A small line nested in a sea of plausible numbers. Genomic trace, partial match flagged. Flag, REV-11. I froze. REV-11 wasn't a department I'd ever rotated in. It wasn't a protocol I'd ever signed. But the hospital had a way of burying certain words behind permissions that only unlocked when you were already in trouble. I clicked. Access denied. I tried again, added my attending credentials, and tried a different route through the internal index. Access denied. The message was polite, almost embarrassed. Ask your system administrator for access to expanded clinical research. I put the phone face down, then face up, as if orientation could change the facts. The new heart was beating, stable on pressors, numbers smoothing out into a tide. In 3 hours, we'd wean the support and pray the body accepted the stranger. In 12, I'd check the labs and write a note that sounded like victory wearing a white coat. In 20, I would break. I just didn't know that yet. The ICU was dim as a chapel. He lay there, the recipient, with a life I had carried like contraband. He was younger than the chart had made me imagine, younger than the damage that had nearly drowned his organs. The ventilator sighed. The infusion pump blinked and blinked again, like a lighthouse learning its timetable. I checked the dressings, verified the drains, adjusted the bed angle. Above the hum, the monitor sang the same refrain, loop-dub, the faint delay before the second, the restful splay at the fourth. Dr. Jude. The night charge nurse's voice was soft enough not to disturb the machines. Your note mentioned a genomic flag. Do we need to log ethics? Not yet, I said. It's probably a database hiccup. Lies, cleverly dressed, walk faster in hospitals. I'll review in the morning. When the nurse left, I did a thing that would have earned me a reprimand if anyone had seen. I slipped my stethoscope beneath the patient's gown and closed my eyes. The sound arrived full and immediate, warm as a palm. A drum I could have found in the dark. A cadence that made the bones in my face ache with memory. Xingchuan, I said without meaning to, and then bit it back like blood. The recipient stirred a ripple through sedation. His eyes didn't open. His mouth shaped nothing. But the lines on the monitor hiccuped once, twice, as if hearing his own name thrown against a far wall. I stepped back so quickly, I hit the rail. The shock ran up my spine and set my teeth clicking. My hand shook so hard I had to set the stethoscope down before I dropped it. In the hall, my phone buzzed. A blocked address. No subject. No attachments. Only one sentence in the body of the email. If you want the truth, follow the arrhythmia. I read it 3 times, then a 4th for the part of me that still thought rules were a roof and not a cage. When I looked up, the glass of the ICU door showed a pale outline of me in disposable blue eyes too bright, mouth pressed into a nurse's badge smile that fooled no one. The elevator carried me down to records, where the night clerk didn't look up from his crossword. If you're here for paper cold, freezer 3's acting up. Take gloves. I'm here for transport logs, I said. Tonight's transplant. Heart won't have the paper copies yet. Digital then. He finally looked at me. Digital's delayed. New privacy wall. Some experiment folks tacked a curtain over everything. He shrugged. Means I sleep more. REV-11. His pencil paused. A faint, amused huff. You didn't hear that from me. Back upstairs, I found myself in the surgical supply room, where chills aren't from air conditioning, but from the way the shelves whisper around you. I pulled an old binder at random. A sheet slid loose and fluttered to the floor on its own stubborn breeze. It wasn't randomly filed. It wasn't filed at all. The top corner was stamped Revival Protocol REV-11. Most of the text had been slashed to black by an over-enthusiastic censor, but a few phrases had survived. Organ as carrier of adaptive patterning. Residual bioelectric signatures mapping to. Ethical perimeter. Love is not consent. There was a page number on the bottom. 41 117ths. If I had one page, the other 116 were somewhere. Or gone. Or burned. At 3:11, I returned to ICU for the 3rd time. I told myself I was checking the lines. I told myself I was verifying the arterial waveform. I told myself any story that got my feet to the glass and my hand to the door. The recipient's eyes were open. They were the color of night distilled, not Xingchuan's warm brown. They were their own entire country. He blinked as if surprised that blinking still worked. The ventilator had been dialed down, the breath more his than the machine's. Good morning, I said, ridiculous words in a room where days were invented by nurses and drips. You're safe? His lips moved around the tube, a soundless tide. Then, barely audible under the alarms that weren't alarming, came a rasp, the shape of breath given a purpose it wasn't ready for. Z, he said. My name's last syllable, the way Xingchuan used to say it when he was too tired to finish the rest. Every cell in my body came to its feet. The monitor clicked over to a new rhythm, a tiny, familiar syncopation, answering a call from far away. I stepped closer, and the world narrowed until it fit neatly between his sternum and my stethoscope. Time, which had stopped for me a year ago, leaned in. Rest, I told him, voice steady, soul not. You made it. The rain returned, soft as distant applause against the ICU window. On the glass, my reflection looked like a woman I'd met once in a dream. I didn't know it yet, but I had just stepped into a corridor with no doors, only echoes. Sleep was supposed to erase the day. But when I closed my eyes, the room inside my head turned into an echo chamber, one filled only with the sound of that heartbeat. At 4:07 a.m., I gave up pretending. I showered, tied my hair, and went back to the hospital. The sky above the city was a shade of metal, wet and sleepless, like me. By the time I walked into the cardiac lab, the world was still half asleep. Monitors hummed, fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, and the smell of disinfectant whispered, "You are not done yet." I opened the patient's file again. Recipient, male, 27. Donor, anonymous. Flag, REV-11 restricted experimental variable. No attending had signed that flag, which meant someone outside the transplant unit had done it tanned, deliberately hidden it in our records. Dr. Ju, a soft voice called. It was Lin, my resident, young, efficient, the kind of person who still believed rules meant safety. You're early, I said. You too, he smiled. I wanted to rerun the post-op echo before rounds. He didn't notice how fast I agreed. We moved around the sleeping ICU like ghosts in blue scrubs. The ultrasound probe slid over the recipient's chest, waves translating muscle into monochrome. On the screen, the heart filled the frame, a foreign rhythm inside familiar architecture. The valves fluttered like cautious wings. The chambers contracted with measured grace. Rate's good, Lin said. No effusion, no textbook recovery. He was right. Everything looked perfect to perfect. I leaned closer to the waveform trace, zoomed into the audio spectrum that barely registered above the baseline. There it was again, the double skip after the fourth beat. A fingerprint made of sound. Hold on, I murmured. Loop this section. Lin frowned but obeyed. The room filled with amplified heartbeats. Loob-doob. That last offbeat tremor sliced through my spine. I recorded the snippet, exported it to my tablet, and ran an overlay one file I wasn't supposed to have. A private archive of Pei Xingchuan's post-trauma ECG from a year ago. The system warned unauthorized patient data. I dismissed it. The two graphs merged. Identical inflections. Identical arrhythmia signature. One dead, one living, and the same electric handwriting. My throat went dry. Run an AI comparison, I said. Of what? Just do it. He executed the script, numbers cascading down the screen like falling glass. Then the system froze, blinked, and threw up a red banner. Anomaly confirmed. Probability of match, 99.78%. Lin stared. How is that possible? It's not, I whispered. And yet it is. Before I could stop him, he tapped report to supervisor. Don't, I said sharply. He hesitated, hands still over the tablet. Doctor, protocol. Protocol won't protect you from what this is, I said. My voice sounded foreign, scraped raw. Something flickered across the monitor static brief, like a transmission trying to start. Then words appeared on the screen where there should have been none. Follow the arrhythmia. Basement level 4. Storage cold unit. Lin blinked. What was that sum test pattern? I yanked the power cord. The screen went black. Forget what you saw, I said. All of it. Dr. Ju, you're scaring me. Good. Fear means you'll stay alive. 2 hours later, I stood at the elevator leading to basement 4. The corridor smelled of iodine and electricity. Access was restricted. The scanner demanded clearance I didn't have. I slipped my ID card, pressed my thumb against the reader, and whispered the oldest lie. I belong here. A green light blinked anyway. Inside, the air was colder, the walls lined with cryogenic lockers humming low like distant wails. Each unit bore a tag, white letters on steel. REV-11-21. REV-11-02. REV-11-04. The number from last night's donor file. My fingertips went numb. I opened the locker. Frost breathed out, curling like smoke. Inside, a clear containment pod held a single heart, grayish, preserved utterly still. It was labeled Archive Specimen Donor 0417, terminated. But the log said that heart had already been transplanted. So what was this? The hum deepened. Somewhere behind me, another pod unlocked itself with a sigh. Light bled through the frost, faintly pulsing looped. I turned. The second pod's tag read REV-11-TEST. The pulse quickened. A voice, mechanical but human-shaped, seeped from the intercom. Experiment in progress. Do not interfere. I should have run. Instead, I took one step closer, my own pulse sinking to the one inside the frost. Xingchuan. The intercom hissed. Then, softly, almost tenderly, Z. The light went out. The hospital never truly sleeps. It only pretends, humming through fluorescent veins while secrets change their bedsheets. By the time the first coffee cart opened, I was already in my office, staring at the frozen image on my tablet -REV-11 test-X-Chuan- before the screen went black the night before. I hadn't told anyone. Not Lynn, not the ethics board, not even myself, out loud. Words make things real, and I wasn't ready for that. But reality, it turns out, doesn't need my permission. At 7:15 a.m., a message flashed on my private line. Lab request. Blood sample verification for patient 0417. Urgent. Again. I walked to the pathology wing. Inside, the tech on duty, a woman with tired eyes and an earring shaped like a heartbeat. Morning, Dr. Ju. You wanted the sample cross-checked? Yes. Donor DNA confirmation. She frowned. Already confirmed last night. I need a rerun. Her fingers hesitated above the keyboard. On whose authorization? Mine. That's not standard. Neither is what I found. She studied my face for a long second, then quietly slid the sample rack toward me. You didn't get this from me. The vial labeled 0417 was colder than it should have been. Frost rimmed the cap. Inside, the plasma shimmered faintly pink under the lab light, live defiant. I loaded the sequencer, keyed in parameters, and watched the bar inch across. When the result appeared, I stopped breathing. Result. Dual pattern detected. Primary donor genome, patient. Secondary pattern, Gu Chingi. 14% correlation. The machine didn't understand what it was saying. I did. Part of me was inside that sample. I sat down hard, every neuron screaming denial. It made no sense. Unless someone had used my stored cells, my consent forms, my research access. Unless I had been part of REV-11 all along, and just didn't know it. I scrolled deeper into the result logs, tracing the chain of custody. The last recorded transfer was signed by a name I hadn't seen in a year. Dr. Pei Xingchuan, Principal Investigator, Revival Program. The date stamp. 1 week after his death. The walls seemed to lean in. I pressed a hand against the desk to stop the spinning. Doctor, the lab tech asked quietly. Is something wrong? No, I lied. Standing? Just bad data. Delete the run. She hesitated, then hit delete. The progress bar crawled, then blinked out. But when I left the lab, my phone vibrated again. Unknown number. A voice, distorted and low. Stop looking. He's not yours anymore. Then click. By afternoon, I'd convinced the ICU staff I was checking vitals. The recipient patient 0417 was awake now, eyes following movement with the uncertain curiosity of someone relearning how to be human. Hi, I said, forcing a smile. How do you feel? Like I've been dreaming too long, he whispered. Do you remember your name? A pause. His gaze drifted toward the monitor, watching the blip of his own heartbeat. Xing, he stopped, frowning. No. That's not right. I felt the floor tilt. That's okay. Memory takes time. He nodded slowly, then looked at me, his voice suddenly clear. You were there, weren't you? Were the fire? The words slammed into me like oxygen too fast to breathe. What did you say? He blinked, disoriented. Nothing. Just, I saw a light, and someone calling my name. I swallowed the shaking. Rest, now. But when I turned to leave, he reached for my wrist grip, weak, pulse steady. His thumb pressed against my vein, right above where his own pulse line echoed through the monitor. For one moment, our heartbeats aligned perfectly, like two signatures superimposed. Then he whispered, eyes half closed. You shouldn't have saved me. The monitor spiked. Nurses rushed in. Alarms shrieked. I backed away, every instinct split between doctor and ghost. As they stabilized him, I caught a glimpse of the screen. Arrhythmia pattern flashing in red. REV-11 marker detected. I stumbled into the hallway, lungs full of cold air. Outside the ICU door, someone had slipped a manila folder under my nameplate. No sender, no label, just the faint smell of ozone. Inside were 3 photos. 1. The donor transfer manifest with my forged signature. A grainy frame from last night's basement camera, me, standing before the frozen heart pot. 3. A handwritten note. The next echo test begins at midnight. The first time he said my name, it wasn't in the ice, it was in the fire. I don't remember flames, only the taste of metal in my mouth, and his voice shouting through the smoke, telling me to run. I didn't. And now, a year later, his voice had found me again through someone else's chest. The hospital corridor smelled of rain-damp linen and caffeine. I clutched the manila folder like it might vanish if I blinked. Midnight. That was what the note had said. The next echo test begins at midnight. I told myself I wouldn't go. I told myself I'd burn the photos, delete the data, forget the heartbeat that didn't belong to any living man. But the truth had its own pulse, and it was faster than mine. At 23:57, I was back on the B4 elevator. The lights above flickered like nerves misfiring. Each floor passing was a heartbeat counting down. When the doors opened, the corridor was dim, cold enough to bite. Someone had left the lights on in the cryo storage. Frost licked the walls, turning metal into glass. And there he was, patient 0417, standing barefoot on the tiles. Hospital gown open at the neck, ECG leads dangling like silver vines. Jesus, I started. You shouldn't be here. He turned toward me, pupils wide, breath clouding the air. You came. How did you even get out? They called me, he said simply. He looked at the nearest pod. Frost clung to the tag REV-11 test. The one inside, he whispered. My skin went cold. There's no one inside. That's an archived specimen. He smiled faintly. Then why can I hear him? Before I could move, the monitor above the pod came to life, flatline, turned into rhythm. Lubit 417 flinched, clutching his chest. It's too loud, he gasped. It's like he's remembering. What are you talking about? He pressed his palms against his temples. There was a lake, he murmured, voice shaking. You wore a red scarf. You said the wind smelled like rain. I stopped breathing. Those words, those exact words, had been spoken the night before the fire. No one else had been there. Xishuang, I whispered. His gaze snapped toward me, the faintest smile curving at the edges. You still remember how you said my name? He took one unsteady step forward. I backed away until my shoulder hit the cryo unit. Cold burned through the gown. This isn't possible, I said. He tilted his head, eyes glinting like static. You said once that memories live in the body. Maybe hearts remember too. I wanted to deny it, to reach for a rational explanation, to hide behind medicine and science and any word that didn't tremble like love. But then he said it softly, brokenly. Do you forgive me? For what? For leaving you in the fire. The air fractured. For a heartbeat I could smell the burning again, hear the sirens, feel the heat crawl across the floor. I was back there on my knees beside him, shouting his name while the ceiling fell. No, I said, voice cracking. You died. He reached out, fingers trembling. Maybe dying isn't what we thought it was. I wanted to move. I didn't. He took another step, hand suddenly, alarms shrieked. Lights flared red. The door behind us slammed shut. Automated security lockdown. The cryopods began to hum. The frost inside the glass pulsed in time with his heartbeat and my own. Dr. Ji Yu's voice echoed through the intercom, cold, official, but strangely familiar. You were not authorized to reactivate the prototype. Prototype 417 staggered, clutching his chest. The ECG monitor spiked wildly. Stop, I screamed. He's crashing. Stop whatever you're doing. Observation only, the voice replied. Subject integration at 72%. Conscious overlap detected. He looked at me through the haze, eyes wide with pain and something deeper. Make it stop, he pleaded. I can't, I said, pressing my hands against his shoulders. You need to breathe. He shook his head. You don't understand. It's not just me breathing. It's him. Then the pod behind us cracked open, exhaling a plume of vapor. Inside, no body, only a suspended frame of light, faintly pulsing in rhythm with his heart. He looked at it, then at me. He wants you to see. The light flickered once, and a voice poured out, warm, human, heartbreakingly gentle. Chingy, if this works, I'll see you again. My knees gave way. 417 fell with me, trembling, sweat and frost mixing on his skin. The monitor screamed a long, endless tone. The intercom cut out. The lights died. All that remained was one echo, the overlapping rhythm of two hearts beating the same dying note. When I woke, the world was quiet in the wrong way. Too clean, too white, too deliberate. I was lying on a cot in the research wing, for in my arm, the steady drip matching a heart rate that wasn't entirely mine. Outside the glass partition, two security guards stood still as mannequins. Beyond them, screens flickered with surgical blue. My voice was a rasp. Where is he? A figure turned from the monitor. Dr. Xiao, Director of Biomedical Ethics or what passed for it here? Patient 0417 is stable, he said. For now, what happened in the basement? He folded his hands behind his back. The gesture rehearsed. An unscheduled activation of the revival protocol. You were not cleared for that level of access. I didn't activate anything. He was already there awake. Xiao looked at me, calm as a man watching rain hit glass. And yet the system recognized your biometric code. I stared at him. That's impossible. Nothing is impossible here, Dr. Ch. That's the point. He tapped a console. The wall lit up with a schematic heart synapse, waveform all tangled together like a living circuit. REV-11, he said, was never about organ donation. It's about memory transfer through bioelectric mapping. We learned that every heartbeat carries a pattern of electrical echoes unique to the host. A language. We taught the heart to speak. You're saying? I'm saying consciousness is electrical residue. When we replicate a cardiac field strong enough, the mind follows. I felt the room tilt. You put his memory inside someone else. Not memory, he corrected. Signal? But yes, your late colleague's pattern was used as a baseline. Colleague. I laughed once, the sound dry. He was my fiancé. Xiao didn't flinch. That made you the perfect control subject. You see, emotion leaves traces. Your physiological response to him created a partial resonance loop. When he died, that loop didn't close. My stomach twisted. You used me. He inclined his head. We used love, Doctor. The most reliable conductor. I took a step forward. You had no right. The right was granted, he interrupted, by his own consent. He touched the screen again. A video played time-stamped 2 days before the fire. Pei Xingchuan sat in a lab coat, pale but steady, eyes clear. If this project can preserve a mind beyond biological death, I volunteer. Use my pattern. If anything remains of me, she'll know. The recording ended. My knees nearly gave out. You let him die for this. He was dying already, Xiao said. We merely redirected the end. I pressed a hand to my chest. Beneath my ribs, my own heartbeat felt borrowed. What happens now? Xiao studied the data. Subject for 17's vitals are deteriorating. Conscious overlap exceeds safe limits. His body cannot contain two identities. One will have to yield, then stop it. We can't. The process is self-sustaining now. He turned toward the glass. Your presence triggers synchronization. You're the only variable we can't control. Meaning the choice will be yours. The door hissed open behind me. Down the corridor, alarms pulsed a slow red. The smell of ozone and antiseptic mixed like thunder. Zhao's voice followed me as I ran. Decide which heartbeat you want to save. The ICU was chaos, nurses shouting, monitors strobing between two rhythms fighting for dominance. 417 lay in the center, arching against restraints, sweat and blood streaking his neck. His pulse danced between his own pattern and his. Chingy, he gasped. Make it stop, please. I grabbed the defibrillator leads, hands shaking. What did they do to you? They opened the door, he whispered. He's still on the other side. Then I'll close it. I set the charge, watching the monitors split in two, one rhythm fading, one growing louder. Wait, he choked. If you stop it, you stop him. Tears blurred everything into red and white. I can't lose you again. He smiled through the oxygen mask. You never lost me. You just carried me too long. The alarms peaked. I hit the trigger. A single shock lit the room. The rhythm steadied once, twice, then fell silent. For one impossible second, I heard both voices in my head, whispering the same word, thank you. Then there was only one heartbeat left. Outside, the storm had started again. I walked to the window and pressed my palm against the glass. My reflection looked back, eyes hollow, chest rising with a rhythm I no longer trusted. Somewhere deep inside, a second pulse stirred, faint but alive. And in that moment, I couldn't tell which one belonged to me. The storm lasted 3 days. By the time the skies cleared, the hospital smelled of bleach and silence. They told me patient 0417 survived the arrest. They didn't tell me which man woke up. I stood outside the ICU glass, watching the rise and fall of his chest. The machine's lazy rhythm like a metronome teaching a new song. Every beat was familiar. Every beat was wrong. Vitals are stable, Lynn reported. His voice was careful, professional, the tone people use when grief is still radioactive. He's responsive, but his cognitive scans show overlapping neural frequencies. It's like 2 channels fighting for the same signal. Which one's winning? I asked. Lynn hesitated. Depends on who you want to win. He left before I could answer. That night I sat beside the bed, chart open, pen unmoving. The man in the bed stirred, eyes fluttering against the weight of sedation. Chingy, he whispered, the word slurred but deliberate. I froze. Do you know me? His gaze drifted toward the ceiling. You used to count my heartbeat when you couldn't sleep. My throat closed. That memory wasn't medical. It was ours. Shinshua? He smiled faintly. Sometimes. I remember his life like a dream, he murmured. And yours like a story I read too many times. The monitor kept time for both of us. What do you feel now? I asked. He thought for a moment. Cold and heavy, like carrying someone who won't stop breathing through me. I wanted to tell him he was safe, that we'd find a way, that science could fix what love broke. But lies refused to form. Instead, I said, do you want me to stop the protocol? He looked at me, eyes full of impossible calm. If you stop it, you'll lose the part of him that still remembers you. And if I don't, then you'll lose yourself. The next morning, the administration sealed the REV-11 ward. Zhao's voice echoed in the corridor. Project suspended. All data archived. But I knew what that meant: buried, not ended. I stole one file before the lockdown. REV-11 addendum, see subject resonance. Inside, a single handwritten line. Emotional tether persists beyond termination. Subject GQ identified as anchor. Anchor? So that's what I was. Not a doctor. Not a lover. A weight holding 2 ghosts to the same heartbeat. That night I returned to the ward one last time. The lights were off. Only the monitors glowed like tired stars. He was awake, sitting up, tracing the scar along his sternum. You shouldn't be here, he said softly. Neither should you. He laughed. Quiet, almost human. Maybe that's the point. I stepped closer. Tell me who you are. He met my eyes. Does it matter? You'll love whoever answers. The words cut and comforted all at once. He reached out his hand. Come with me. Leave this place. Let it end. I can't. You already did, he whispered. The night you shocked me back. He leaned forward, pressing my palm against his chest. The beat beneath was steady, warm, and terrifyingly alive. Whose heart is this? I asked. Yours, he said. It always was. By dawn, he was gone. No alarms, no alerts. Only an empty bed and a quiet monitor, blinking no signal. Zhao found me hours later, standing at the window again. Where is he? He demanded. I don't know, I said, and for once, it was true. He studied my face, then looked at the monitor. You understand what happens when an anchor is severed? I do now. Beneath my ribs, something shifted, one heartbeat splitting into 2. For the first time, I didn't know if I was hearing life, or the echo he left behind. The first thing I lost was time. The clocks around me kept moving, but I couldn't tell which moment belonged to now. Days blurred. The hospital became a labyrinth of white corridors, repeating themselves. Every turn brought me back to the same door. REV-11, storage restricted. But that door didn't exist anymore. It had been welded shut, sealed under concrete. Still, I heard it breathing. Dr. Ju, Lin's voice broke through the fog. He looked older somehow, eyes rimmed red. You should go home. You haven't slept. I don't know where home is, I said. He hesitated. They said the patient, the man, is gone. Maybe it's time to let him be. Gone. I laughed softly. No. He's just learning how to hide. From who? From himself. Lin shifted uncomfortably. There's something else. The biometric scans, they're wrong. It's like your readings are syncing with his, even though he's off. I looked at my hands. The pulse under my skin answered in double beats. He's not off-grid, I whispered. He's in me. That night, the dreams started. In them, I was back at the lake. Red scarf, gray sky, wind heavy with rain. But the reflection on the water wasn't mine. It was his. When I reached out, the surface broke and I woke to the sound of my own heart monitor screaming. 2 rhythms again. Loob-doob, loob-loob-doob. The nurses said it was stress, anxiety, sleep deprivation. They didn't hear the voice layered beneath the rhythm. You shouldn't have saved me. By the second week, I could trace him inside me like a phantom limb. Sometimes it was a memory, a half sentence, a laugh that wasn't mine. Sometimes it was a sensation, heat in the chest, fingertips trembling like remembering a touch. I started recording everything. Notes, egg traces. I labeled them hallucination 1 to 12, but they were too coherent to be hallucinations. At 2:14 on the 13th night, I heard my name whispered through the intercom, Chingy. I went to the lab. The corridor lights flickered awake as if recognizing me. The sealed doorway -11 was open. Inside, the air shimmered like water. And in the center of the room stood a silhouette, built from light and pulse. Not a body. Not a ghost. A convergence. Xinxuan. He smiled, a ripple through static. You called, and I came. I didn't call you. You never stopped. The walls vibrated, equipment blinking alive, monitors syncing to my heartbeat. You shouldn't be here, I said. Neither should you. He stepped closer, light flickering where his hand should have been. They think love is data, that it can be measured, but it's a contagion. It spreads, then stops spreading. He shook his head. Too late. He reached forward, his light hand touching my sternum. The cold rushed in an electric flood. I gasped, falling against the console. On the monitor, 2 ECG lines overlapped, then fused. Do you feel it? He whispered. We're the same frequency now. I tried to pull back, but the light held me. The room tilted, gravity collapsing inward. Xingchuan, please. You can't destroy what you created. The lights surged white, blinding, soundless. When I opened my eyes, I was on the floor. The lab was silent. The door was sealed again, the room dark. But the pulse under my skin was steady, 1 rhythm, not 2. For the first time in weeks, peace. Then my phone lit up. A new message, no sender. REV-11, integration complete. Outside, the dawn sky burned the color of ash. I walked down the corridor barefoot, feeling every heartbeat echo through the floor. For a moment, it almost sounded like applause. Then it was gone. The recorder was found in a drawer that shouldn't have existed. When the maintenance crew cleared the sealed lab, they cataloged every wire, every syringe, every shard of broken glass, and one small dust-covered device labeled REV-11 personal log. They gave it to me like evidence from a crime scene. I took it home, though home was just an apartment that no longer felt inhabited by one person. The voice that came through was him, raw, quiet, unedited. It started with a breath. Then a faint laugh, the kind he used when the world scared him more than he'd admit. If you're hearing this, Chingy, it means I didn't make it to the morning. The air left my lungs in a shudder. They told me about the program. Said we could preserve what's left of a person, the pattern of their heart, the ghost of their rhythm. I said yes before I even understood the question. I know you. You'll hate me for it. You'll stand in that lab and tell them they're wrong. That love doesn't belong on a spreadsheet. You'll be right. But I couldn't stand the idea of leaving you with silence. If science is the only language left, then let my love be written in data. They needed a pattern strong enough to survive the jump. Theirs failed. Mine worked. Because every time you touched me, my heart learned a new rhythm. Maybe that's what love does, it teaches the body how to remember. The tape hissed, soft as rain. They'll call it integration, revival, progress. Don't believe them. It's just longing, given a machine to live inside. If I come back, and I'm not me, don't save me again. Let me go. A pause. Then, barely audible, if I am me, even for one breath, say my name once more. That will be enough. The tape clicked off. I sat in the dark for a long time, the player still warm in my hands. Outside, the city was quiet, the kind of quiet that follows confession. I replayed the final line until the battery died. Each time the static thickened, until his voice dissolved into white noise that somehow still sounded like love. In the hospital records, REV-11 was listed as terminated. But in my own chart, my heart rhythm showed a small irregularity, a hesitation before the second beat, a soft syncopation at the end of the fourth. The same signature as his. I pressed record on my own device. My voice shook, but it didn't break. If you ever hear this, the experiment worked. You're still here. Maybe not in body, maybe not in name, but every heartbeat I take still sounds like yours. I stopped the tape and placed it beside his. Two ghosts in plastic cases, sharing silence. Some nights, the silence hums. Not loud, not haunting, just alive. And when I count my pulse, it answers, steady and patient. Like a voice whispering through circuits. Chingy. It's been 40 days since the lab was sealed. 40 days since the last line of his voice. The city has learned to move on. So have I, at least on paper. I signed the report. I closed the file. I buried the experiment under bureaucratic silence. But silence is never empty. It carries echoes. Some nights, I walk to the roof of the hospital. The wind there tastes like disinfectant and rain. Below me, the city's heartbeat flickers, ambulance lights, street signals, 1,000 electric arteries pulsing in rhythm. I count the beats. One for me. One for him. Somewhere between them lies the truth of what we became. Lynn says my vitals are fine now. Whatever anomaly there was, it's gone. He smiles too quickly, as if he's afraid I'll ask the wrong question. But I already know the answer. The anomaly didn't vanish. It simply learned how to live quietly. Sometimes, when the hospital generators hum at night, they hum in 4/4 time. Lube, dupe, and I hear a whisper threaded through the static. You still count my heartbeat, don't you? I took a leave of absence last week. Packed my things, deleted the encrypted logs, left my access card on Zhao's desk. He didn't stop me. He only said, you can't undo integration. I told him, I'm not trying to. The lake still exists. The water's higher now. The old dock half submerged. I sit where we once sat, scarf around my neck, recorder in my lap. When I press play, his confession hums like distant thunder. The wind folds his words into the surface of the lake until it ripples with light. If I am me, even for one breath, I remember, I whisper. The tape clicks, looping, fading, restarting. Every repetition weaker, softer until all that's left is a steady beat. I close my eyes and match my pulse to it. One rhythm, then two, then none at all. When I open them again, the world is pale with mourning. The recorder lies silent beside me. I stand, brushing dew from my hands. For a moment, I think I see him standing at the far end of the dock barefoot, smiling, the wind moving through him like he belongs to it. He raises his hand. So do I. Between us, the air trembles not with grief, not with science, just with recognition. And when I walk away, the world keeps beating. Once for me, once for him, and once for the space in between, where love learned how to breathe.